anything can be daunting, but I'm here to help. Learning crochet is not as overwhelming as you might think. I'm going to go over this information with you, and hopefully you can dive right into this creative, beautiful, multitaskable art form and fall in love with it just like I have. If you already know where you want to start, I put a list of timestamps in the description below, and you can jump around however you like. So where do you start? I believe there are 3 choices. The first 2 are shopping. Who doesn't love shopping? And the third choice is buying a pattern and going from there. Let's go over the first shopping option. So for the first shopping option, you're going to get a skein of yarn, preferably a light color, one that has an even texture throughout the whole skein, is worsted weight or bulky weight yarn, and is made of acrylic and or polyester. I will be going over the yarn types a little later in this video. Again, I have timestamps in the description below if you want to just jump to that. Now the hook. If you chose a worsted weight yarn, you'll want a hook size H-5.00 millimeter or I-5.5 millimeter. And if you chose the bulky weight, you'll want an N-9 millimeter or M-10 millimeter hook. Once you have your items, you'll go home, change into your comfy clothes or your jammies, and put on some tutorials of how to crochet. I will have some tutorials up shortly that you can look up and learn how to crochet from me. I do not recommend that you watch the tutorials with popcorn though, because the salt and butter will ruin your beautiful yarn. So this option will allow you to build muscle memory so you can hold the hook and the yarn at the same time. You'll also be able to control your tension better, and you'll learn a few stitches that you can use in your first pattern. This will really vamp up your excitement when you get your first pattern and start working on it, instead of instilling frustration and the desire to give up. In my experience, this is the best place to start because you'll gain the muscle memory, you'll know the stitches, and you'll be able to hold the yarn and the hook, and it won't be as frustrating. If you agree and feel this is the best option for you, you can jump ahead to that timestamp right there. So the second shopping option is going to the store and buying everything you think you will want or need. So the yarn, you'll buy all the yarn, all the tools, and anything else that you want while you're there. Most people find a yarn that they love and they buy that yarn and then they go learn how to crochet and all that stuff that way. And that's totally fine. However, even for the most creative and artistical person, this can be a very difficult place to start. But there are legends out there who can pick up anything and just do it. Like me. All right, let's go over some pros and cons for this starting point. So pro number 1, you get the yarn and tools right away and can start on your project as soon as you find a pattern that will work with them. No need to wait a minute longer for your dream of becoming a hooking wizard with a metal wand. Pro number 2, you get to use a yarn that you fell in love with. Pro number 3, they have starter kits that include all the tools, the yarn, and the pattern that a crocheter will need. Pro number 4, most skeins of yarn have patterns on the underside of the band that wraps around each skein of yarn, like these. Now let's go over the cons. Con number 1, you don't know how much yarn you're going to need to get. Con number 2, you don't know what size hook you should get yet. Con number 3, you don't know what pattern to search for. Some patterns require specific types of yarn and specific size hooks. So if you don't have that, then you're kind of lost in the water. And con number 4, you can sometimes be limited on color or texture choices if you pick the yarn first, because like I said, some patterns are specific as to what you should use. This option is not impossible to start with, but it can be difficult as a beginner. I love shopping for yarn, but from experience, if you don't go with option 1, the best of option 2 and 3 is to pick a pattern first and then go shopping for the yarn. I have bought so much yarn because I loved it, but then it was really hard to find a pattern that it would work with. That's why a lot of people who crochet or knit have a ton of yarn in their craft rooms because they buy it, but then they can't find anything to do with it. There's a lot of memes out there for a reason. We've all done it. If you want to start with this option, you can skip to there. If still undecided, let's go to option number 3. Okay, so picking a pattern first. What if you found a pattern that you absolutely love, and so you are ready to apply your reading skills and create a masterpiece of textile wonder? Great! Starting out by picking a pattern can be a lot less daunting than starting with the yarn that you loved. This option has pros and cons as well. The first pro is that the pattern will almost always tell you what your shopping list is for supplies and materials. Keep in mind though, if you're reading an older pattern, a vintage pattern, and some Irish crochet patterns, they're not going to tell you. I don't recommend those for beginners, even though they are fun. Let yourself get used to working with yarn before you move on to those. Pro number 2. You can always choose colors that go together depending on how the pattern looks. This can make your shopping experience much more pleasurable. Pro number 3, you know how much yarn you will need. Like I said in the first one, the pattern will usually tell you what your supplies and tools need to be. Pro number 4, you know what hook size you need. Now for the cons. You may not know the stitches yet. Con number 2, patterns are like reading another language. You kind of need to know how to read them. Con number 3, you may not know the terms for the tools yet. If this is the option you want, great. If you're still undecided, also great. Keep watching because we're going to go over some things that are very helpful for absolute beginners, some even up to advanced. I'm an intermediate advanced, and I didn't even know some of this stuff that I'm about to share with you. No matter where you start, you'll at least want to know the basics. We're going to go over the yarn fibers that are best for beginners and specific details you'll want to know about those yarn fibers. Now, I don't have every kind of yarn. I know, crazy again, right? So I'm going to use some more presentation style images to help you see what I'm talking about. All right, let's go. So looking at a wall of yarn in the store can be intimidating. There are textures, colors, different sizes. Let's go over some of them so you're not the one standing in the aisle with wide eyes about ready to walk away without even giving it a try. So there's hundreds of different brands and different yarns and different fibers that you can get. So I have deduced that there's 2 fibers that are best for beginners. And if you've been listening, I have mentioned it once or twice already. Before we get to that though, I want you to see all the different types of fibers and where they come from. So the first one is natural fibers, and those come from animals or plants. The animal-based fibers are going to be wool from sheep, merino wool, which is another sheep, alpaca, angora, which is a goat or mohair, cashmere, which is also a goat. And then we have the plant-based fibers, which is hemp, bamboo, cotton, linen, and silk. And they come from what you would think they would come from. The silk comes from worms, and then the other 4 come from plants. Now, the viscose and the rayon are often combined into one thing. A lot of people say they're the same thing, but they are made differently. They do have some different characteristics about them. The way that they're made makes them semi-synthetic. A lot of times, the semi-synthetic and the synthetic are going to be hypoallergenic, which means people with allergies will not be affected. So then we move over to synthetic fibers, and that's where you find your acrylic and polyester and nylon. Those are the stronger of fibers. They usually last longer, and of course, because they're handmade, they're going to have a lot of aspects about them that the natural fibers don't. I have also listed a bunch of novelty yarns, but as a beginner, we're not going to go over those at all. I will have another video that goes over all of these, and the variegated, the blended, and the self-striping, those will all be mentioned in the next video. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to comment below and let me know. Now we get to the best yarn fibers for beginners, and acrylic is the number one. And the reason for that is that it is the most consistent in texture and size throughout the entire skein, and you can find acrylic pretty much in any store. Polyester is a close second, but a lot of people find it to be a lot more scratchy than acrylic, and that's what pushed acrylic to number one. Again, I'm going to mention when you buy your yarn, you'll want it to be a worsted or bulky weight, which is a number 4, a light color, and that color doesn't have to be white. It can be light green, light blue, light yellow, or even a cream color, and you'll want something with a consistent size and texture. Hey guys, I know I look really different, but I'm jumping on here real quick because I realized that some people might not be too excited about acrylic or polyester because it's made from petroleum products. So I wanted to give you some natural fibers that you can start with, which include wool and cotton. Now, I'm not going to be able to go into it much on this video because the video is pretty much already done and I don't want to go back and edit a bunch of things. So I will add it into the next video, and I will add the pros and cons and how it's made. So just wanted to let you know, if you are a beginner and you would prefer to stick to environmentally friendly products, wool or cotton are your best bet. Some quick things to note: make sure you get your wool from a credible person, because a lot of wool farms are not nice to their sheep and it's not as environmentally friendly as you would think. Both fibers are made with chemicals because they have to clean them. But if you get it from a local source, a lot of times they clean theirs with just soap and water. So just do your research before you go and buy some wool or cotton, because you prefer it to be more environmentally friendly. Okay? Just wanted to let you know, and let's continue. Now, both of these fibers hold up against frogging, and I told you earlier we would go over that shortly, so I'm going to tell you what frogging is now. Frogging is when you have to pull out your work that you've already completed, or more specifically, the act of ripping out stitches that you've already completed. Now, they think that this name came from somebody saying rip it as they pulled it out, and associated that with a frog. So that's how it got its name. All right, so now I want to go over with you what the characteristics of each type of yarn are. All right, so let's look under the microscope at acrylic. Okay, not really, but kind of. It is made out of polyacrylonitrile. I think I said that right. I still butchered it, but I think I said it right. Or PAN for short, a polymeric material that combines the properties of polyester and polyamide. It is a synthetic fiber, which means it's fake or man-made, and some can have plastic or other manufactured materials used in the making. Some of the pros that are worth mentioning are that you can find acrylic yarn pretty much everywhere. And I know I've already said that like 3 times, but you can. And it resists stains. Notice I said resists and not proof. It's not stain proof. Due to this fiber being cheap to make, it is also cheap to purchase. This fiber is one of the most durable fibers you can get. It is hypoallergenic and can be water resistant. Again, notice I said resistant and not waterproof. If it's exposed to water for a long period of time, it will soak up water, but at first it is resistant. And something that most people find extremely appetizing about acrylic is that the fibers can be washed in a machine, dried in a machine, and ironed. Of course, I recommend the iron on low heat. All right, moving on to some cons about acrylic. It's not very breathable and it does not wick, which means it doesn't pull moisture away from your body. Therefore, it's not good for items that are worn in the summer or in humid places. It does get very heavy when it gets wet. When it starts soaking up all that water, it gets heavy. It is not pill or felt resistant, which means when you wash it, it will over time, not right away, over time, it will collect little balls of lint on the fabric. There are ways to combat that, and you can look it up on the internet as well. The texture of acrylic can be kind of rough, but it does soften after you wash it, and it is much softer than wool or polyester. And the last con, I think, is that it's not renewable, recyclable, sustainable, or biodegradable. I plan to have a link in the description if you're curious to know more about that as well, and what makes the fibers renewable or sustainable, biodegradable, and recyclable. Keep in mind that these statistics are for 100% acrylic. When you get to a blended one, you're going to use the characteristics of both and kind of combine the positives of all of them. But remember, the cons will probably be combined as well. So this type of yarn is best used for blankets, scarves, hats, shawls, wraps, gloves, sweaters, pullovers, and other warm clothing that could get wet. All right, moving the microscope over to polyester. Polyester is synthetic and made of polymer-based fiber created from petroleum, which allows this type of fiber to be recyclable. It is also used to make yarn types like Chanel. Mentionable pros for polyester include it's easy to care for, wrinkle resistant, it holds color well, doesn't shrink, and can be recycled. It too is cheap to make, so cheap to buy, very durable, and hypoallergenic. It can also be washed in the wash machine, dried in the dryer, and ironed, but unlike acrylic, it is wicking and pill and felt resistant. Some cons for polyester are that it is highly absorbent. But Miss Jessie, your image shows it is water resistant. Good, I'm glad you're paying attention. Good observation. It can be water resistant, but this is because of its wicking abilities. It absorbs water inside the fiber of the yarn, pulling the moisture away from your body. Yarns that wick need to be dried much longer than you would think because the inside of the fiber needs to dry as well as the outside of the fiber. It is water resistant to things like a quick rain or a car driving through a puddle and splashing you. This type of yarn is best used for making outerwear because it is kind of scratchy. It is very durable though, so you can make bags out of it. You can do home decor and pillows, outdoor accessories, and it is good for kid and baby clothing because it is durable. Again, remember these stats are for 100% polyester. If there is a combination, you're going to want to look at both of the pros and cons of that type of fiber. All right, let's talk about blended yarns real quick since I've mentioned it a few times. Some of the most popular blends include acrylic and polyester, which results in a softer yarn that is lightweight and resistant to wrinkles and shrinking. Then we have wool and nylon blends. These yarns feature super merino wool combined with up to 25% nylon fiber. The nylon adds strength and makes the yarn machine washable, making it ideal for sock knitting. Then you have mohair and silk blends. This blend uses light and airy mohair wrapped around a strong silk core. The result is a surprisingly warm garment with luxurious softness. Then we have cotton and acrylic blends. These blends combine the benefits of both cotton and acrylic. Typically, they consist of 50% cotton and 50% acrylic, offering softness, stretch, and better washability. Then we have polyester and viscose blends. Viscose provides a cool, breathable quality, while polyester adds strength and durability. Then you have wool blends. Wool is often blended with other fibers to create yarns that are strong, yet not as scratchy as 100% wool would be. The common blends include wool and cotton, wool acrylic, and wool silk. Pointing out again, the next video I plan to do will have a lot of these different yarn fibers and their characteristics, and it won't just be for beginners. And now to the bulky yarns. Bulky yarns are typically very soft, made from acrylic or wool or blends of the two, with other fibers like superfine alpaca or baby alpaca, which is even softer, cotton, linen, polyester, nylon, rayon, viscose, or silk. The reason it is recommended for beginners is because it is a larger yarn and requires a larger hook. It's easier to see what you're doing in the stitches that you're making. Be mindful though, any bulky textured yarn is not going to be beginner friendly. Let's go over some of the characteristics of bulky yarns. So a brand that is a favorite of many, and no, I am not affiliated, I'm not being paid to say this, I am not promoting them, I don't know what else, whatever else you have to say, but Barnett yarn is extremely soft and is very often consistent throughout the entire skein of the texture and the weight of the yarn. Velvet is another one. I love both of those. Velvet is a fiber of yarn that you can get, not a brand. Then you have acrylic and cashmere. They're also good options, but make sure you stick with a light color because if you go dark color, it's hard to see your stitches. They are often fluffy and soft, and care, however, might be a bit less desirable than plain acrylic in worsted weight. Some caution with these bulky yarns is you can't pull on them hard. Like if you're trying to make a knot, they can break easily. I've had it happen many times and it's quite annoying. Something else to mention is most of them don't shrink. Most of them will be made out of acrylic, but will have a blend of something else. So just make sure you know those pros and cons as well. Due to these yarns being super soft and easy to work with, they are considered a luxury yarn and oftentimes will be more expensive than the other fibers. You'll also find that the length in your skein of bulky yarn is going to be shorter than that of the worsted weight yarn. Another con is a lot of these bulky options are not machine washable or machine dryable. That's the word. You can't dry them in a machine. And most likely you can't iron them either. They have been known to shed, even though they don't pill or felt, they can shed, and the color doesn't hold as well if left in the sunlight for long periods of time. The next thing is kind of for knitters only, but it did say that it can be a problem for crocheters, but usually because their tension is a little bit tighter than knitting, they rarely have this happen. Worming is when the yarn wiggles out of its stitch and it looks like you have a hole in your project. Bulky yarns are less durable than other yarns, even if they have a strong fiber, and they can sometimes feel unbreathable, even though they're supposed to be. And lastly, because of how these yarns are usually made with chemicals and machines, they are not renewable or sustainable. They're not biodegradable and not recyclable. If you pick this yarn, the best patterns to make with this type of yarn is usually stuffed animals, sweaters, throws, blankets, and of course baby blankets. So then we get to the hooks. I want to mention this again. If you go with a worsted weight yarn, you're going to want a hook size H or 5.0 millimeters or an I-5.5 millimeters. And if you go with bulky yarn, I recommend a size M hook, which is -9.0 millimeters or N-10.0 millimeters. All right, so let's go over to my desk and we'll go over some tools. Let's get into the tools. Yay! Okay, of course, you should always have a pair of scissors in case you need to cut your yarn. I like to use these stitch markers. I bought a lot because I will sometimes leave the stitch marker in the project and do each round a different color so that I can count each round, because some patterns give you 12 rows of single crochet and I get lost. So these are really good to have for that, especially if you're doing a lot of the same thing over and over again. And then another thing that I use, I don't use this very often, for yarn, but it is good to have if you need help getting the yarn through the eye of one of these. This is a tapestry needle, and it has a very wide eye. That's the eye there, if you're not familiar with needles. It has a very wide eye compared to most needles so that you can get the yarn through. You can get plastic ones like this, but I prefer the metal ones because I always break the plastic ones. So I recommend getting a metal needle. I also recommend you getting some of these. They're little finger rubbers. And I got this one at the dollar store. This one I got at Walmart, and as you can see, it didn't last very long, but they have other ones at Walmart as well that you could try. I just haven't bought them yet. These work amazing when you're trying to pull this needle through your yarn so that you can get a good grip on it and pull. I can't always grab the needle and pull, so I love these. They are so helpful. Okay, now I'm not real familiar with knitting, but I will show you these. So these are knitting stitch markers, and they also hold, well, I guess they're not really stitch markers. They hold your place on your knitting project so that you can go off and do the other side or something with your knitting needles, and it just sits on here and keeps your work from coming undone or losing a loop, which is why I don't do knitting very often. So these are your general run-of-the-mill knitting needles. The sizes are on the flat tip. These are size 10. Oops, I don't know if you can see that with the light. Nope, that didn't help at all. Anyway, that kind of helps. There you go. So those are size 10, and you can of course get any knitting needles you like at any art store, or sometimes you can even find them in a convenience store. But anyways, these are for Tennyson crochet. I'm not going to say it right, I'm sorry. Tennyson crochet. I'll spell it in the description below so that you can look it up. These are really good because you can hold lots of loops on one crochet hook. Like these with the handles, you cannot get very many loops all on here at once. These will also kind of help if you're doing shell stitches. So it's very nice to have around. All right, so another one is this kind of hook, and it has like a rubber long end to it with a little bead at the end. This is for really long projects like sweaters and blankets. And that Tennyson stitch, these work really good for that, because then you're not trying to squeeze them all on the same hook, you know? These are probably going to be easier for you to slide along here. I have noticed that the rubber kind of catches the yarn, so it makes it a little harder to keep the flow going, but if you don't mind it, then that's perfect. I prefer that though still over these, because I have more space to work with. All right, so then we're gonna get into the crochet hook. There are many different types of hooks. You're going to have the ergonomic ones, and they generally have a size printed on them. So you just have to either really be good at remembering your sizes, or get one of those things you can put the head of the crochet hook through so that you can see what size it is, because this will wear off the more you use it. But it is ergonomic, and I really prefer to use these over the ones that don't have an ergonomic handle. Then we have these ones. These are probably the most common that you will find, the cheapest go-tos, you know, they're everywhere. And their size is usually on the flat part, and it's kind of
raised, so that shouldn't rub off unless you're just like a machine crocheter, and then it might rub off. So you have your crochet hooks are labeled with a letter and a number. Okay, now the A is one of the smaller hooks, and then the higher in the alphabet that you get, the hook is going to be bigger. So this is a size L. As you can see, it is much bigger than the size C. They each have their own number, and I don't always go by that because in US terms, they don't always mention the millimeters of them, but you can look them up online in case you have a pattern that is just using the millimeters. Like a lot of vintage patterns will have just the millimeters. So it's very helpful that you can look it up online these days. When you get under the A, when you go lower than an A, you get these. And these are steel hooks, and they start with numbers. And the millimeters in this case are what a lot of patterns will use for these smaller hooks. These are the size hooks that you'll use with your lace yarns, like this, and you'll make stuff like this with them. It takes a very long time, but it's very pretty. Very, very, very pretty. I also have a point. I don't think I have it in here. Nope. I have a 0.6 hook, and it is so tiny you almost can't see the hook. It's funny. Maybe it's because I'm getting old and blind. I don't know. But yeah. So, and the last thing I wanted to tell you is you do want to have some type of measuring stick or tape or anything that you prefer, but you do want to have some measuring things for your gauges. Gauges are important for clothing, but not necessarily for blankets. But if you want the blanket to be the right size, say you're making it for a baby and you don't want it too big, then a gauge would be important for that. So always have one of these around somewhere. I'm always looking for mine. Luckily, I had it with me today, so I could show you. So there you have it, your hooks, your tools, your yarn, everything you need. If you have any questions or I didn't cover something that you are curious about, please let me know in the comments and I will happily reply and explain that. Or you could even message me. All right. Thanks guys for joining me. Hope you learned something today. Happy crafting!